Monkeyboy's YouTube channel is the greatest YouTube channel, stands independently, dependently, intersubjectively, interdependently, all the above. I'm talking from the depths of my soul, so subscribe to his YouTube and Patreon.
God's not real, Davey. Shut the fuck up. Yeah, what's up, user? Do you have good evidence that God exists?
Yeah, at least for me, you know?
Yeah, sure. What is it? What's the good evidence?
I mean, like, how could you explain life in this world, you know? Like,
you think me not being able to explain life is evidence that there's a God?
Yeah, I mean, like,
why would you think that?
I mean, like, we're here, right?
What's up, baby? You can't explain life? Fucking shut the fuck up. God exists, bitch.
Yeah, look, what I'm not understanding is, like, why would I think it's like, why would I, like, if a God exists, you know, maybe facts that I would think would be true that's indicative of God. I don't see why I would think, namely one of them being people incapable of explaining life without a God.
I mean, like, if you see your surrounding, you know, like.
Okay, so now there's something else. You're saying there's facts about my surroundings that are reasons to think that a God exists.
Yeah, so
yeah, what are they?
How could you explain?
Like, what things around us are like evidence of God?
I mean, like, all.
Like, suppose we can't explain it, so what?
Yeah, so there is something, right?
No, that doesn't follow.
Well, there's something, there's lots of things, but I'm trying to understand what around us is evidence of a God.
It means there's something like there's a creator or designer or something.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like,
yeah, but we understand you believe that. We're trying to understand the reasons.
Let's just say that you believe in Big Bang and stuff.
Like, look, like we couldn't explain lightning like thousands of years ago. Should they have concluded that?
Let's just make it easy let's just like kind of divorce the conversation from my views. Let's like ignore my views for the moment. Let's just I think it's best you just articulate the reasons you have to think there's a God. Can you just do that?
Yeah, because, you know, the way I see
because look, like if you're in an empty room and there's no one to like question about their beliefs, you would say that you nonetheless remain justified in your belief that there's a God. So what I want you to do is just iterate the reasons in a very concise way to me, right? So then we can go from there. Is that good?
Yeah, okay. What I'm saying is, it's uncertainty in our life, you know? We're not certain about anything in this life. Some say science could explain life. Some say religion explain life, you know? Most of you, like those of you...
I understand there's like a range...
Let me finish my statement.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, those of you who act like modern and stuff, you know, you say science explains life, but all these physicists, mathematicians, they are in constant dispute about life, you know. They say there is a universe.
But look, what's not interesting is to tell us that there's like competing views that are disputed amongst like academics. What I'm asking for is just for you to tell me the reasons to think there's a God.
Yeah, but deep down inside, I believe there is God, because I mean nothing explains.
Yeah, but what are the reasons to think there's a God? Is like what I'm constantly asking.
Okay. Can I say my personal experience? You know, you don't want to take that, I know.
Okay.
The way I say it, you know.
You experience something that's evidence for God. Yeah, what is it?
Of course. You know, I have seen His existence in my life. Maybe you don't understand that, but for me, that works for me, but it might not work for you.
Well, look, there's like an obvious issue. It seems you're reading into your observations. What's not legitimate is when you see when you put a pencil in water and it appears to be bending, that you say you observe the water causing the pencil to bend. What you do is you describe the mere facts of your observations, and you can make an inference from these facts, I think, or I'm justified in believing the water's causing the pencil. You don't kind of load that in.
Let me ask you a question. Who created this world?
Well, I take that question to be loaded because I'm not convinced the world is created, let alone by an agent. So when you ask who, this question is clearly pivoting. Let's try and be more linear here. Before we get to your point, let's tie the knot on where we are at in the dialectic or in the conversation. Currently, we're investigating your reasons for why you believe there's a God. So if you can, before we get to my views, just clearly, succinctly offer your reason.
I mean, like, I have to ask you reason too. So what do you believe in? Like, what do you believe in?
Well, no. You can communicate.
What's life for you? You know.
Hold on. No, I just want you to communicate your reasons for why you believe this.
Of course, I told you I believe in God. As simple as that. Whether you believe it or
No,
not.
no,
So I'm asking like,
okay,
what
but
do you believe in? So I mean, like,
yeah, I'm
just
saying,
at least like give me something, you know.
yeah, I'm saying before we get to that, what we want to do is we want to close the knot on your reason. Now, I'm still not clear what is the reason to believe in theism under your view.
Okay,
You said vague stuff
don't
like
worry about that.
things you
So
observe around you and your experiences, and you
I mean, like,
never
we're
gave.
in this planet. So I mean, like, can you explain that? At least just give me something. So
Wait, hold on, but we're not. Again, you're
I really
just
want to talk to you, but
you're
at least just give me something, you know.
you keep okay. We can talk about my views now in a way that's not burden shifting. What we want you to do is offer your reasons, and after we tie the knot on consulting your reasons, I'm fine to have you investigate my views and my
Yeah,
reasons to think there's not a
I
God.
said I
But
believe in God.
at the
I have
moment, we're not
my
going to jump
reasons,
from
but
my view, your
I'm
view, my
asking
view,
you.
your
So
view. What we're
just
going to
can
do is
you
we're going to
explain
methodically
like
walk through.
can
Why are
you
you over
explain
talking
like
me?
I'm
Look,
not,
we
you know.
can work with each other in this conversation. You don't need to over talk me. I'm clearly speaking, right? And I don't think you're reasonably interjecting either. So I'm not going to let it slide. So look, what I'm saying is we can be methodical. We can work with each other. And what we're going to do is walk through your reasons at the moment. So look, what is your reasons to believe there's a God?
Because I've tried to read uh,
You tried to read?
so many scientific views, so many research and stuff. I read the Bible. At the end of the day, I just took something that resembles for me, you know, something that works for me, you know. So you cannot ask me like
I
why.
think that's confusing the type of reason, maybe. Look, what I want is is evidence, to be clear. Like, read the background. I want an evidence when I say a
What
reason.
kind of evidence you want? Like,
Any evidence, literally any.
yeah, but when we talk about evidence, I'm gonna ask you evidence too. So why do
Yeah, but
you
Oh
I
my
already
god, man.
why do
explained
you think
this.
that there is no God? You know,
Yeah, we can get to that after we consult your evidences. That's fine. Now look,
yeah.
let's just go through your evidence, then we can
Okay.
go through mine after.
Do you know the meaning of phase?
Fazbear Entertainment,
No,
where
no,
you get jump scared? What are you
phase,
talking about?
phase, F-A-I-Z.
Phase rug?
Yeah.
FAIZ?
Yeah. What is going on?
I believe in that. Okay, listen.
I'm
So
living in the Matrix. I'm Neo. And
yeah,
Davies Agent Smith. And this is,
so
I don't know
anyway,
who this guy is. NPC.
no. Okay, let me see your.
Kai Sanat. Look,
Can you
I
give me
just.
your perspective? Like, there's no God. Okay.
Okay, we can get to my perspective in a moment. First, we're going to walk through your perspective, then mine's after. I said this like a million times. Let's just get the evidence for theism, right? Let's just what's the evidence of God that
I
you
just
have?
laid it out. I'm a believer. I believe. I have a faith. So that's how it works with me. So how about you? Okay.
You have faith?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I think we're done here. Sorry, brother. Sorry, brother. But that shit's not going anywhere. I tried. I really tried. I strained my ability, but my intellectual arms gave out. Well, not intellectual. My patience arms gave out.
Okay.
You got to stay in the app to talk.
You can if you want to read off something, you can just like split your screen and then you can.
The Prophet Muhammad said that.
You can when you go off the app, we can't hear you. If you want to read something, just
Okay.
split your screen.
I didn't mean to do that. Okay.
Okay.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said at the end of times the Arabs will be competing in tall buildings, and that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, but that's like a. I mean, that's like a vague. That's first of all, that's like a very vague and benign.
How is that vague?
To make?
How is that vague?
Yeah, like when you say competing with tall buildings, that could be interpreted as like they could have like one tall building and multiple competing with who exactly. It's like not really a specific thing, and also it's like not really like Arabs were already kind of like roughly technologically advanced groups of people. It's not really surprising to think that they would have like tall structures. And also, like if you're trying to make an argument from prophecy, which even if I granted that was a prophecy, I don't think that would be a good reason at all to believe in God. But like it's first of all, it's like a vague prophecy, and it's not like a surprising thing.
How is that not surprising? And back then they weren't technology. They weren't advanced. Back then they weren't unified. Like they were surrounded by big empires.
Relative to like other civilizations, the Arabic people were like actually relatively technologically advanced. It's not like surprising to think that they would like be very wealthy, have very large buildings. It's not really like a surprising thing to say,
Okay, well, if you say like that, like prophecy doesn't really prove God, just like other prophecies such as
and better, I want to be clear. Even if he did make a prophecy that came true, that still wouldn't be like very good evidence in my opinion. But like
no, but there's multiple prophecies that came true. Like I'm not only saying one.
Okay, well, I mean, so if I were you, all the prophecies that are kind of like benign and non-specific, I would remove those. Like, just give us your best one. Like, what's your best prophecy?
Okay, there's also another prophecy that the Euphrates River will drop, and that's what's happening right now.
Wait, hold up.
That's
Okay,
specific.
hold on. When you say it would dry up, when would it dry up?
When?
Yeah.
Well, the prophet said that at the end of times the Euphrates River will dry up. He's not like saying a specific time period.
Okay, then he's saying, okay, so then how do you know so you're saying the Euphrates River is drying up right now? First of all, that's not even true.
Well, wait. Oh wait. What do you say? What do you say? Sorry.
First of all, it's not that. First of all, I don't think that's true. But even if it were, right, it wouldn't. Even if the river was drying up, that wouldn't be enough to show the prophecy came true, because, like you said, it'd have to be at the end times. So you'd have to know both.
How do you not know it's the end of times right now?
Oh, even if I granted we don't know, then you don't know either, and so that doesn't mean the prophecy has come true.
Okay, well then, what's proof for God existing? Like, if
you're
every
the one
single prophecy came true, like you could just say like we don't know when end times is.
You're the one making the claim that these prophecies have been fulfilled. First of all, it's not the case that the Euphrates River is drying up. Even if it were,
no, it is. Search it up. It's drying up.
Okay, and also, like, we could also think about, like, when you say drying up, you could even sort of question the specificity here. Like, what does drying up mean exactly when he says it? Does he, because you might expect him by drying up to mean, like, drying up in a more complete sense, like the river's like basically gone, like other rivers have in the past or something like that. But that's not what's happening to the Euphrates River.
I believe the Euphrates River is actually completely drying up. Search it up if I'm incorrect.
Let's just figure this out real quick. I shouldn't even be doing this. All right, sorry, Monkeyboy has to do. I need to do something.
Yeah, I mean, this type of reasoning is just awful, because, like, look, the point is that if you've actually, so look, this is just like, I don't even know if I want to go through this, but look, like, suppose this was true and that this was some evidence. The thing is just that the net probability of Islam updating on that. So look, we have that fact, and that fact offers some evidence for Islam, but the probability before considering this evidence is the probability of Islam before the evidence is extremely low. So then when we consider how strong the evidence is, I don't see why that would be any reason really at all to consider Islam any more likely in the relevant sense that you should be committed to Islam being true.
I mean, if the prophecies from Islam are true, then why would you not believe in it? Like,
for the reason
you're
I
not
just
really making
explained.
sense to me.
Look, imagine I had the hypothesis Superman saved someone, right? Imagine someone fell off a building and they survived.
Yeah.
Right? And everyone's marveled, right? And one person says, I believe it's Superman, right? Now, when we ask what's the evidence it was Superman to explain the phenomena of the person surviving the fall, right? Superman, like, saving them. Imagine they show a little piece of red cloth, right? And what we would expect is that Superman would have a red cape, right? So it's not surprising that a piece of Superman's cloth would fall off. That's a possibility, right? And we wouldn't expect that if Superman exists, that it's kind of expected that there would be that fact. But realize how weak that evidence is that there's Superman. Just a small little red fabric. That's not good reason to think that Superman exists and saved a person from falling off a building. Do you think that evidence? Sure, I might concede that's evidence, right? We would expect that clothing, right? It's potentially something we would expect if Superman existed, that in the act that it might tear, a piece of fabric might tear and it would fall. But that's so weak that the probability of Superman existing and doing that action is already extremely unlikely. And when we update on the evidence of that little piece of fabric, it does nothing to get me any closer to thinking Superman exists. Do we get that?
Yeah, but like if there was like many like sources that prove Superman existed, like videos, people seeing it and stuff like that, you could confidently say Superman existed. And
people seeing what?
Like people seeing Superman. Like if you have like tons of sources, tons of evidence, then you could say that he existed. And that's what I'm trying to say. Just many prophecies.
No, what I'm just saying. Okay, but now look, this isn't responsive. Okay, I understand you want to say that there's a range of certain prophecies that are fulfilled that they make like some accumulative case for theism, right, or Islam. Right. But my point is just the prophecy you named is so weak evidence.
Okay. Do you want more prophecies?
Yeah, but do we understand how that evidence is not strong at all?
Yeah, like if I just give you just one prophecy, then that's not enough evidence.
Yeah, but look, so there's two ways of kind of reasoning. It seems you're doing something similar to what's called Bayesianism, which is just like saying that we would expect this fact is not surprising if Islam were true, right? It's kind of something we would think would be true if Islam was true. But there's something more interesting that we could say which is like an abductive objection. So basically an objection about whether that evidence is best explained on this hypothesis that Islam is true, right? What you could think is that we can basically make a different explanation that expects that same fact, right, which is not Islam, and that's preferable. So even if you reason in this way that this prophecy is expected on Islam, we could still just offer you a better explanation than Islam for the fact, right? So it wouldn't even matter if you're reasoning evidentially in this way, right? Because we could have just kind of undercut the entire type of reasoning by undergirthing a preferable explanation for the facts. Like imagine someone, like, to kind of break this down, like imagine, let's go back to the Superman case. Okay, so we have that red cloth, we have Superman. That's a really bad hypothesis. It's already implausible and unlikely that Superman exists, right? And then we have this little evidence for Superman. I can make another explanation, right? I can make an explanation that's preferable. Instead, imagine there's like those, what is it called? There's like these types of cloth things that stand above the label of a building, right? Like a company name, and it has that overarching cloth thing. Imagine the woman fell, hit that cushioned her fall, and she survived the landing, and her hitting that cloth broke a piece of that fabric. Now, that explanation also would expect the piece of fabric to be on the floor, and that explanation, for obvious reasons, is preferable to Superman. It's more probable than Superman, and it's more plausible if we consider certain explanatory or theoretical things, right? So in the same way, what if I just said something like aliens that desire to deceive humanity of Islam were doing that, right? And that would be preferable because it's simpler, right? Because it's not introducing supernatural entities.
I don't know how to respond to that. So like you don't really like believe like any prophecies? Like
no, I'm saying if I grant you those facts, what I'm saying is that we can just engineer a better explanation that also expects that fact equally, right? Which would be the aliens, where the aliens have the technological capability and the desire to deceive humanity of Islam. So they're kind of producing these same feats that you would expect under Islam.
okay, so like if I like gave you 1,000 prophecies and they all came true, like you still like wouldn't believe, like you would like try like find other evidence, like other causes for it?
Okay, so yeah, so I think this is a point of confusion. It might be on my behalf of not communicating well, but I doubt that that's what it might be. But look, do you understand what I'm saying? Because you're kind of, what you just said now was already actually addressed by what I just said. So maybe it's just, so we want to just basically add clarity to the playing ground. What was it you were understanding from what I said? And I would just clarify what it was, however you characterize what's relevant in understanding what I was saying. What did you make out from what I said?
I think you're trying to say like even if a prophecy is like coming true, like it's more likely to like be a cause of like something else like simpler, and like you don't like really like know if it's specific to Islam or not.
I'm saying that latter part I wasn't saying that, but the earlier part about, yeah, we can offer a simpler explanation that also expects those same facts, that's right. I'm saying you can offer whatever evidence you have. If I make a theory that expects all those prophecies, adding more and more prophecies wouldn't do anything, because the theory I designed would also just keep expecting those new prophecies you introduce. And that my point is that my explanation is simpler. Do we get that?
Okay.
Yeah,
so you're just like looking for like the simplest explanation.
Yeah, and I'm saying that we could just offer aliens as a better explanation for these prophecies. Right? In the same way in the Superman case, right?
Yeah.
And he dropped. Okay.
Hello.
I don't hear anything now, so it should be fine. Yeah, what's up? What's your best evidence for the existence of God? Oh, you gotta stay in the app.
You hear me?
Yeah, I said, what's your best evidence for existence of God?
Yeah, so what kind of evidence would you accept?
Any. I don't cherry pick evidence.
So when people talk about, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about, which God are you talking about?
Any God.
So just any God in general?
Let's make this clear. Not what's typically labeled God, I'll clarify what I mean by God, which broadly captures the relevant sense of God that people actually believe in. A supernatural agent that manifested or created the universe.
Okay. So are you familiar with early human history?
No.
Okay, so would you accept that in early human history, a lot of kings and emperors saw themselves as gods?
No.
You wouldn't?
Obviously not. Do you recall my definition? A supernatural agent that manifested the universe into existence. Kings are natural beings. They're spatially extended. They're not things that exist outside of space, and they don't create the universe. No king believes that unless they're delusional.
Well, are you aware of the Japanese Empire?
No.
They were led by an emperor who thought he was the god of the universe.
Cool. So what's the evidence there's a God?
I mean, by him existing and being a real figure, then your whole argument is broken down because technically
now you're just saying there's a historical figure who had the belief there was God. I'm asking what's the evidence.
You just agreed to that definition of God. And I just told you that there are several people who lived and walked the earth.
Agreed to what? I didn't agree to anything. I literally just explained what I meant by God, and then you said that a Japanese emperor believed their God, and then I said, okay, so what's the evidence there's a God?
He was God. If people believe that he was God, then doesn't that prove that?
What is the evidence there is a God? Is what I'm asking.
I'm just giving it to you. There are multiple people in history who believe that they've been God.
So the evidence is supposed to be people believing their God is evidence that God exists.
That's why I asked you what evidence you would accept in the first place.
Why would I think that's evidence?
Because it's firsthand testimony, documents.
Look, let me break this down to you since you don't get it. Evidence, just described in very strict mathematical terms, X is evidence for Y when X raises the probability of Y. So there's a probability already assigned to Y, and the probability conditional, or the probability of Y considering X, is made more likely. Here's a basic example. The reason we would say the floor being wet is evidence of rain, because when we let's say there's the probability it rains today, maybe like 10% chance. When we find out that a large percent of the floor is wet, that's evidence it rained today, because what we would expect is that fact. So the probability it rained today without the datum versus with the datum, it's more likely considering the datum the floor's wet, as opposed to not. Now you want to say,
all right, now listen, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in rhetoric or any of these.
This isn't rhetoric. This is explaining.
I'm not interested
very
in
basic
any entrapment
tenets.
or any of that.
This isn't entrapment. This is me walking you through basic tenets of probability and
evidence. Well, that's simple to
do. Evidence
you're not understanding what I'm telling you. So let me attack it from a different angle.
No. You've already signed off.
When somebody writes down the Bible and says this is something that happened.
Stop.
What do you think that is?
Do you hear me saying stop?
No, I'm not going to let you speak over me.
Okay, so then I'm going to need to mute you if you're not going to engage. You're going to get 3 strikes at best, and I'll drop you. In fact, just the fact you're acting like this, it doesn't seem productive. If you know you're not going to engage, why waste my time? You know you're not going to be productive. You're not going to work with me and be cordial and try and make a fruitful conversation and understanding on either my side, your side, both of our sides, and reach, hopefully, a mutual conclusion in navigating this reasoning. If you're not willing to do any of that, and you're just going to overtalk me when you're clearly pivoting in the dialectic, and I'm willing to explain how what you're doing is not productive to the conversation, you continue talking over me, saying you understand that I was talking, and you're not going to let me interrupt you when you're clearly just being evasive. You're just not being good faith. So look, you can either reconstruct yourself and moving forward, engage, or if you know you're going to behave like this, just drop yourself for your own sake. There's no need to be an asshole and know you're not going to be productive and waste both of our times. If you know you're not going to be productive, you're not going to get the conclusion you want out of this. Neither will I. You're muted. You can unmute yourself. So recognize you're either going to engage or you're not.
What's your point in doing this TikTok live? Monkeyboy
so
logic.
Look, we're not gonna do meta. We're not gonna do meta.
So no, we're gonna stay. That's a simple question. What's your point in doing this live?
We're not gonna do meta. We're gonna stay on the points we were in the dialectic before you obviously were being evasive. So look, where we're at is you claimed. Look, you could just, if you know you're not gonna engage, you could just drop yourself.
You're the one that's not engaging with my questions.
Your question is meta.
What the fuck does that even mean, bro?
It's a conversation about the conversation. Okay, so your meta meaning it's conversation about the conversation rather than walking through the substance of the conversation.
Okay, why are
where
you
we
saying
last
there's
were,
no good evidence of God on
why,
TikTok Live? Why is that your action? Why is that your choice in
where
life?
we last were,
Why is your choice in life going on TikTok Live and saying
where we last were in the dialectic was you said the fact people believe their God is evidence for God. So I just succinctly construed evidence in the most traditional way people competent in math would. So we're clear on what we mean by evidence in the conversation. Very clear. If you think I'm talking like a nerd or you still don't understand, even though that was very basic, and I even gave you a very clear analogy with the ring.
I understand everything you're saying, and you are being evasive and not engaging with any of it, and choosing to try to make me seem like I'm not engaging with you. And this is how debate lords operate. So if you want to answer my question as to why you're on TikTok Live,
that's meta. Look, we're interested in getting the reason, dissecting the reason, analyzing the reasoning, critiquing, objecting, whatever. We want to talk about the reasoning.
Let's start at square one.
We want to talk about the reasoning and the evidence. We want to talk about the reasoning and the evidence. We don't want to talk about what is my reasons of doing this live. The fact that I have to explain away. If you overtalk me one more time, I'm going to drop you. Let's try and work with each other. You can stop interrupting me, and we're going to try and remain fruitful in the conversation. If for the millionth time you be unfruitful and obviously are not doing anything in your power to try and work with me and actually have this conversation,
the same pressure
you can leave the live yourself. You can leave the live. Okay, get out of here. You're like such a dumb motherfucker, bro. Oh my fucking god. Bro's drooling on his wheelchair.